Hey there, we are at the 7th section of my Webflow course, and today I want to show you about this really cool perspective and skew animation. The thing is, every time that I design a new site, I try to really push something. It has to be one or two key elements in the website that I've never tried before, and this is definitely one of them. I've never tried this. I wanted to see what could be done with perspective, with skew, in terms of selecting the device, and I came up with this concept and I thought it would be cool to teach it, and it turns out that it's actually pretty easy to do in Webflow using their awesome interactions tool. So we're gonna learn about that today. Again, starting from where we left off in the previous session, we have this and we set up the layout right here for the phone, as well as two tabs menu and the interactions. Now we're gonna go to Hero, select tabs container, and we're gonna go to the right side, and there's the fourth tab called interactions. This is where we can set up an element trigger or a page trigger. An element trigger is more for a specific element, whatever is happening to that element, versus a trigger for the page is when the page is loaded or when the scroll happens in the entire page. In this case, we're going to apply to the tabs container. We're gonna click next to element trigger on the plus sign, and we wanna have a mouse move over element, which means that it's going to detect your mouse position within this box that is the tabs container. And we're gonna click that right here, and then we are going to go to action and click on play mouse animation. For that action, we're going to create a new animation. Click on the plus sign right here, and this is going to show us everything that's happening when the action of the mouse X is changing, or for the mouse Y position. I'm going to change the name for tabs. So this animation is specific to the tabs container. So the first thing we want to change is when the mouse moves from left to right. We're going to click on a plus sign, and we want to use one of these animations, including move, scale, rotate, and skew. These are using CSS transformations, and the one that we're interested in is skew. Now you're gonna see the timeline from 0% to 100%. 0% is when the mouse is at 0 in terms of X position, and 100% is when the mouse is at the end, so 100% in terms of progress. So we're gonna start with this one, have this selected, and when the mouse is here, we're gonna set the skew in terms of X at -3. So it looks like this. It might not seem like a lot, but you can always play with these settings and you can see how it's going to look like with more sharp settings. In this case, I don't want to make it too in your face, so I'm going to just put -3. For the end, we're going to set it to +3, so just 3. Already, if you preview this, you can see that when I move left or right, it just skews using the X position. If I do it in the other sense, which is the Y position, it's not doing anything. So let's add that, because they can be combined to create an even better effect. So I'm gonna go to the mouse X action, click on the plus, skew again, select 0%, go to the Y for the skew, from -3 to 100%, +3. Now let's test it, and we have this pretty cool stuff. Of course, more can be done, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. We're gonna move the rectangles, and we're gonna create an even cooler effect using perspective. Now it's important to note that whatever you have selected on the left side is what the animation is going to apply to. In fact, it shows you the name for the skew. So the tabs container is what it is being controlled. Next, we're going to animate this box and this box. I'm going to open the tabs container. I'm going to find the tabs menu container. I'm going to click on the plus sign and I'm going to use move now. When you do that, you can see that it has the option to affect the class or the specific element. If you select the class, it's going to apply both of them because both of them share the same class name called tabs menu container. And that's great. That's exactly what we want to do. So we're going to start with the move. And then if we play with the X position, we're noticing that it only applies to one of the containers. And that's because this one has the combo class with a second, while this one is the original one that applies to both containers. So we're going to have to use this one instead, the original one that is blue. So it's going to apply to both of them. So let me go back and delete this one, select the blue one, and add that move transform. Now if I play, you can see that it affects both of them. Then I'm gonna set a specific value to -40, and I also want to set the end position. So I'm going to right click this, duplicate it, move it to this box, and now I have the end value, and change that to +40 instead. If I test this, now I have some really nice perspective going on. It's much nicer this way. I'm going to do the same for the Y position. So again, selecting the right box, the blue one, I'm going to create another move transform for the mouse Y and set the Y position from -40. And it is very important that you set the right one. If you make mistakes, you can always click on the red X button and then try it again. So -40 for the Y position. Duplicate this, put at the end, and set +40. Now it should look like this, and we're gonna apply to two last items. First is the tabs content, which is the phone itself, and then the text as well, so the menu items. So I'm going to select the tabs content, add a move, and then set for the X position from -20, duplicate to X20. Do the same for move for Y from -20, duplicate to +20. Next is the tabs menu. Again, make sure that you select the menu items within the blue box, and I'm gonna click on mouse X for move, set from -60, duplicate to +60. The same for the mouse Y for the Y position, -60, duplicate, and then +60. So this is what we have so far. If you go to preview, you're gonna find this really cool effect. And on top of that, all the interactions work perfectly. So that's the power of interactions, which allows you to detect a scroll or a mouse position or a hover effect, and then apply the correct transitions as well as move, scale, rotate, and skew transforms to create really cool effects. Before we move to the next session, I want to do some practice. So all the things that we've learned so far in terms of interactions, media queries, I want to apply some interactions for the button here, and I want to make sure that we place this phone and this UI right here correctly depending on the device. So we're going to go back. Let me close the tabs container and then select the purchase button and go to style. And this is where we're going to customize the hover state. So I'm gonna scroll down a little bit, go to the background, and instead of background white, I'm going to set a background of this color code, which is purple, and set the font color to white. Additionally, during hover, I'm going to set a contextual drop shadow using this color. So for the box shadow, I'm gonna change the color to this color right here and set it to 30%. Let's get out of everything and go back to none. And now we need to set the transition. Click on the plus sign for the transition and set to all properties. The duration can be 300 and that should be fine. And now we should have a really nice transition. For the interactions now, we're gonna select purchase, go to interactions, add another one called mouse move over element, and play mouse animation. We're going to create a new mouse animations called purchase. It's basically the same techniques, so we're gonna start with the purchased and start with the skew. For the X, we're gonna set from -5 to 5. And you can see it's not too bad. For the Y, it's another story. So we're gonna set skew again. If we make the position Y a little bit too much, you can see that it's very awkward. Even at -5, it's kind of too much. So I'm just gonna set it to -1 to +1. Perfect. Now let's open the purchase container. Let's apply it to each of these elements. But first, I'm noticing that we don't have classes for some of these elements. So let's go to styles and rename this one to purchase title. The second one is going to be purchase text. And the third one is purchase icon. With this in place, then we can go back to the purchase container, which is the button. And for the mouse or interaction which has been created, click on the mouse animation called purchase and resume our interactions. At this point, we can select the purchase title, add a move transform, and I'm gonna do the same for all of them at the same time. So this as well for purchase text and for purchase icon. And for each of them, I'm going to set X -5. This one is X -5 as well. For the icon, it's going to be X -8. Like this, I can just select all three of them at the same time, duplicate at the same time, and just change to positive values at the same time. And I can just duplicate as well and move to the Y area. So duplicate these three, move to mouse Y actions next to purchase. And for each of these three, I'm going to reset the values, set the Y position from -5, then make sure that all of them set to -5 in terms of Y. For the icon is -8. Then duplicate all of them at the same time. Move to the end at 100%. Set to +5, except for the last one is +8. So let's preview this and see how it looks like. Now, it seems that the elements on top are floating correctly, but the button itself has some trouble. It seems to have some extra transition. Let's go back and try to fix that. We're gonna click on the purchase. And here, remember earlier when I mentioned about the transitions, the all transition can be a little dangerous because it applies to all transformations, and that includes the ones that we're trying to use for the interactions. If you actually move this, you will see that our interaction is working perfectly. As a result, you're going to have to use the specific transition for the properties. So I'm going to add a specific transition for the background color. And also another advantage to using specific transitions is that I can set the duration and the timing for each of them separately, and that can give really nice transitions as well. So in this case, the background, I'm gonna set it to 200 milliseconds, and I'm going to add for the font color as well. This one is 300. And finally, the box shadow. So box shadow, this one is going to be slower at 500. So now if I do my mouse over, the box shadow takes a little bit more time. You can barely notice it, but it can really create interesting transitions, and it does not conflict with the interactions that we set up. Let's finish this session with the media queries. There are some techniques in terms of scaling that we can do. So this is for the tablet. Get out of preview, then we can select the tabs container, and we can use transform to fit into the screen. So I'm gonna set to scale and set it to 0.8. So now it's smaller, and thanks to that, it's allowing me to fit in the screen. I can probably move this a little bit using the position as well. So instead of 50%, I can set to 45%. By the way, the scale can be a little bit buggy at times. So for example, this became much smaller for no reason. What I noticed that you can do is that you can just turn this off and on, and it's going to go to the exact size that it's supposed to be. Now let's take care of mobile landscape. And here we can definitely push it down by going to the position values. I'm gonna set to top 800 and position from the left side, so at 0, and then fix the margin at -40. So it should look like this. Now we have a new problem. Our tabs container is using position absolute, which means that it does not take any physical space. It's just floating in another plane. And so we're gonna need to compensate that space by clicking on container and setting that extra padding to compensate. So I'm gonna set a padding of 800, and now it's pushing down the content, such as the mockups content. So now this is looking fine. Let me go to mobile portrait, and it's pushing the content fine as well. It's just that this tabs container is a little bit too big. So what I can do is set the scale to 0.6 and then change the margin. So instead of -40 to -160. And of course, there are many techniques to go about this. We could have hidden this or move these boxes differently. Usually there's a lot of tweaks to do whenever you have to adapt to mobile and desktop, but hopefully the techniques that we're learning here today will help you for your design. So that's what we have so far, and we're ready to publish this and see how it's gonna look like on a live website. Let's click and open in a browser, and voila. We have created this really cool interaction. It's fully interactive, shows the right phone, animates the right way, and on top of that, it is adaptive as well. Of course, we can have tweak a lot more, but I think this is pretty dang good. In the next session, we're going to learn how to do scroll parallax. So we're gonna have a bunch of UI elements, and it's gonna move at different speeds. I think you're gonna really enjoy it. I'll see you then.